Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here on a beautiful Sunday. I'm sure we'd all rather be outside, so I'll try to entertain you as much as possible. I'm Mark Lighthouser. I'm the Senior Curator and Chief of Design. I realized as I was sitting up there looking at the new East Building, which will be 40 years old next June 1st, that I preceded the building. So I have been here 43 years. And one little anecdote, when I first came to the gallery, the very first morning I was here, it was much smaller. There was no East Building. It was being worked on, 1974. I was being taken through the West Building by a wonderful docent named William Williams. Some of you may remember him, a great guy. And a fellow crossed, this is before hours, a fellow walked in front of us from one gallery to the other, and he said, that's our chief registrar. He's been here 30 years. And I turned to Bill, whom I hardly knew, and said, that's the most depressing thing I've ever heard. I couldn't conceive of 30 years in one place. Anyhow, I'm going to talk about exhibitions in both buildings. We are also responsible to some degree for the sculpture garden, but it doesn't involve a tremendous amount of our time. The design studio has like a friendly octopus. It has a number of tentacles around the building in different levels and different areas. A graphic arts area, a large electrical shop, a large carpenter shop. We also have those facilities out in Landover, and I'm going to show you an image of one of those. But the kind of the heart of the office is right here in the northeast corner, right up here in the West Building. And it's more or less central to the exhibitions that you know are in both buildings. So without further ado, I'll proceed. So what I want to say about the design department is that behind these very quiet doors that you'll see in the West Building, this one, in fact, is a current exhibition, America Collects. It's 18th century French painting. It's a great show if you haven't seen it. But behind these doors are these wonderful, I think, kind of Aladdin rooms at times. And this is the entrance to the design studio. You'll see a kind of a gargoyle thing up there. When an exhibition first is in its earliest stages, we use photostats, Xeroxes, and those are pinned up. And this is called the grotto by everybody in the building. So when your exhibition goes to the grotto, and there are about 4 of them in there at the moment, but it is dominated at the moment by a large exhibition on the animal in Japanese art, which will be here in 2019. And that's pinned up here. So we pin them up, and the reason we pin them up is that we can change them. The loan forms come, and the objects can't come for conservation reasons or whatever, and we can move them around, ideas, take them away, and so on. When they go to the next phase, they begin to turn into maquettes and little 3-dimensional models, and it becomes more serious, and that goes upstairs. So here we have bits and pieces of exhibitions. This is Bryant Johnson and Travis Ferguson, both in our office. So the stair to the design studio, you can see Charles Wilson Peel's great image here of his son. This painting, of course, is in the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and we're playing off our stairs here. This is a Rousseau staircase. Used to scare my granddaughters, but they're onto it. A typical day in the design studio is more or less exactly like this, and you'll see different people in the design studio. I see some carpenters, production people, architects, so on. So that's what's upstairs. Every Wednesday at 10:30, we have a meeting of all the department heads in the Division of Design, and they come up for about a half an hour, and all of the weekly agenda items are addressed. Looking around, I see architects, graphic designers, carpenters, painters, an intern or 2, production people, an accountant, most importantly. And this is our state-of-the-art carpentry and paint shop in Landover, Maryland. And when we first built this, some of the carpenters were loath to go out to Landover, but after about one half an hour, they said, this is the greatest thing on earth. We've got a lot of room. The equipment is brand new. It is state of the art. They could park. It was just very easy. So they've never wanted to come back downtown. Now, the graphics are courtesy of Rob Shelley in my office, who is our photographer, and he documents all the exhibitions. They are all documented for all art historians out there. Every exhibition, since I've been here, has been documented, and they are in our archives and accessible to everyone. So you can't blame me for this type. It gets kookier as we move on, but Rob's a great photographer. So I want to show you some of the challenges that come our way, which we welcome. This large birthday present was too big to come in the normal secured channel of the West Building, which is right at Constitution Avenue. If you're in that 6th Street and Constitution Avenue semicircle, there's a ramp that goes down, there's a guard at the top, and that ramp is where we can secure works of art. This was too big. It could not pass through. So we waited for a good day, removed some very heavy windows, and in it went. That's what was in the package. 18th century Baroque Portuguese coach. Anyone who has walked across the plaza on a hot day, or any woman in high heels, does not like the Belgian block patterns of granite that we have out there. I know, my wife has told me many times. This is the block. We've used the same pattern that's on the plaza, so if you saw this exhibition, it would be a little familiar. It's the same pattern that's in Rome. This was the same coach. We found a small watercolor of this coach in Lisbon, and we blew it up. So it kind of put the coach in context. And this is one of the comparisons that was on the back of the horses. Now, the East Building was built to have a certain amount of flexibility. And one of the things that it could do that the West Building really couldn't do very easily was we could raise up sections or the entire ceiling upstairs in two of the towers, Tower 1 and Tower 2. This is Tower 1. So for the exhibition that was coming up, we pushed this ceiling, which is at 22 feet. That's what you see when you're in the gallery. Pushed it here to about 40. And when an object like this came to the gallery, we had the ability to push it up and bring the object. It's great, isn't it? Great image. So the Olmecs, you know that we don't know the language. They are a mystery. It was the first great civilization in the Yucatan area. Nothing organic, no language, so it's a mystery. And these great, huge basalt heads are what exist. We don't even know how they were oriented, whether they were on organic steps or something built around them. It's all gone, all buried in the jungle. So it's subjective. This makes it look a lot smaller, but that head is in this box, and we didn't know how much this weighed. Nobody had ever weighed it. It was down in Jalapa, Mexico. So we put it on the back of this truck. Cab would be down here, and we down where there's a lot of oil drilling in that area. They weighed the truck. You know, when you're driving up 95 and you see those weigh stations, they're kind of a mystery. That's what they did down there. Turned out to be about 9 tons. So it was a very serious bit of weight. So we rented a truck that had an extraordinary braking system, which allowed the truck to go down the ramp and not, break free and go through the wall. And that's how we did it. Much of what we do is subjective. I tell my Corcoran students, now GW students, there's no right way to design an exhibition. There are many, many variables. You work with whomever the best curators are that you can find anywhere, and you work as a very close team, and I think that makes the best exhibition. So why did we do it this way? Well, we got his chin up off the ground, so he had a presence like the great and powerful Oz, big, big thing. But this is not just a subjective. Underneath are steel beams which displace the load of the 9 tons onto the beams that are in the floor here so that the piece, in fact, did not go through the reinforced concrete floor. And then this was the largest object ever to be displayed in the East Building, not the heaviest, not the most fragile, but simply the biggest. It came in at a time when we had the great Albrecht Dürer exhibition as well. You can see early in the morning. This is one of my favorite images at all, and I only wish we had some great, cymbals or music or something when this piece goes up. 3 choreographed forklift trucks. It's not particularly heavy. It's about 300 pounds, which isn't really all that. These things can lift considerably more. But up it goes. This is before hours. And this is the kind of behind-the-scenes deconstruction/construction that happens that we hope you don't have to see. This will become an area where we built the new tower galleries. So we had this much room. It was done for a number of reasons that I won't go into at the moment, but it was available space. So Rusty Powell saw the option of getting in there and building the 2 galleries, which now have the Calder directly above us and Rothko Barnett Newman. So the piece came in. The art handlers here had rigged up. Many of our art handlers, by the way, are sailors, weekend sailors. And they rigged up a block and tackle system so that although this weighed about 300 pounds, maybe a little more with the structural pieces at the top, nobody pulled more than about 16 pounds when it went up. So there it is. Natalia Goncharova was the designer. We also showed 3-minute film clips of this is the prima ballerina dancing in front of it as the Firebird. This is the domes of Moscow. This is Donna Kirk in my office, one of the architects. And as you can see, we pushed the ceiling up. In this case, this is 32 feet, I think, so it's up around 40 feet. He's pushing. So, building opens 78. In 1979, we did an exhibition on Rodin, and it put Rodin into the context of his competitors in Paris in the 1870s. And imagine trying to be a sculptor in Paris in the late 19th century. You had a lot of competition. So this is a 1870s photograph of the old Palais des Champs-Élysées. It's gone now, it was razed. But the interesting thing here is that everything is white, and it's white because the artists cannot afford to cast them in bronze. They're looking for commissions, so they've cast them in plaster. And all of the plants here were considered exotic plants. You'll see cacti and succulent and all that, century plants and palm trees and whatever. So we used this as a reference. We showed the photograph of Bartholdi's Lafayette. Bartholdi, of course, did the Statue of Liberty. And then we managed to borrow from the New York parks the Lafayette from Union Square in New York, cleaned it up a bit, and put it in the context. And then, as you can see, we recreated the room in a certain way, much, much smaller. And the ceiling is the pay ceiling. It's that ubiquitous triangle that's above your head. It's everywhere in the building. It's in the elevators. It's even up in the refectory where we eat lunch. And if you are the last one at the table, you get the point. So everybody is on time. A photograph of David Smith's installation of the Voltri sculptures. This was one of his very favorite installations. The Voltri are my favorite sculptures by Smith. It's in a restored Roman amphitheater in Spoleto. And when we were opening the East Building, this was still coming up. We hadn't been in here. The idea of displaying the Voltri in a gallery just didn't seem right, but we really were at a bit of a loss. So we created kind of an indoor amphitheater with daylight in a big one of the tower galleries at the time. And it was only supposed to be up for 90 days, but it proved to be so successful, it stayed up for 7 years. But it's the fate of my job, for better or worse. We tear things down. So there it goes. You can see the old footprint of it on the wall here. And it made way in 1985 for, still to date, the most complicated and expensive exhibition that the gallery has ever done, the Treasure Houses of Britain. This is Blenheim, by the way, Winston Churchill's house. So Treasure Houses of Britain more or less had to do with, it covered a time span of 500 years. It went from more or less a moated castle like Bowden Castle all the way to Lutyens in the 20th century, who also designed part of the embassy, British Embassy up here. So this is Addingham, and for one of the galleries called the Waterloo Gallery, a gallery post the Napoleonic defeat, this is the kind of room we were trying to recreate. But remember, we're in the East Building, and we're talking triangles and Pei's design. So let's see how flexible the building could be. So in that shell, we simply started building a series of 3 rooms that more or less looked like the West Building. And that's how it was done. And one of the jobs that we have more or less 2.5 people that do it in the office when it's needed, is faux painting. And things like this is not a porphyry column or a porphyry base or a travertine or marble. These are all painted. The inspiration for one of the other rooms, a room of sculpture, came from this photograph, 1906 photograph of a house called Ince Blundell. The house stands, but the collection has been moved to Birmingham. But I think this shows, even all these years later, the beauty of the behind-the-scenes carpentry work that's done at the National Gallery. It always has been. It was done when the West Building was built. The craftsmanship in that building is extraordinary, and it continues today, whether it's a temporary exhibition or permanent work like the new staircases in the East Building. The finished room. And then Hardwicke Hall. This was a house that was owned by Elizabeth I's kind of rival before she became queen, Elizabeth Shrewsbury. And the most expensive architectural element that you could purchase at this time was glass. So Bess Shrewsbury wanted to show she had money. And there was a children's rhyme, Hardwicke Hall, more glass than wall. She even put her initials on, just to make sure you knew who he was, E. Elizabeth Shrewsbury. See here and way over here, Elizabeth Shrewsbury. So glass. Thinking of Hardwicke Hall and the glass, and looking past, this is the Countess of Arundel, looking past her, it's the room behind her that we're interested in. The ceiling, the side lighting, the heavy pediment over the door. We couldn't think of anywhere else in the building to build this. We'd never built in this area. This is the mezzanine today that overlooks Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, the only glitch we ran into is more or less at the 11th hour, the National Trust in England stipulated that if we were borrowing some of the more delicate objects, we had to mimic the temperature and humidity conditions in England. So after our engineers thought we were crazy, and we put in all this behind the walls, like that. And then down, we're going to just go down here for a minute. And here we cast an interesting door frame. This frieze exists today in the design studio. And then we were lucky enough twice since I've been here to borrow Samuel Hoogstraten's trompe-l'oeil painting, View Down a Corridor. So at the end of this room, which was 100 feet long, we gave the optical impression, I hope we intended to, that you had to go down another corridor as well. Now, moving up a bit, just about 5 or 6 years ago, an exhibition on Pompeii and Herculaneum. And here is an early 19th century lithograph. You can still see Vesuvius romantically smoking. This is in Pompeii. This is the House of the Faun, the famous sculpture of the faun sat on this pedestal. Pedestal exists today with a reproduction on it. But even then, they knew they had something quite unique, and they covered it with a tarp. And in 1834 or 36, they moved the great mosaic of Alexander defeating Darius, a Roman copy of a Hellenistic Greek mosaic. They moved it to the Naples Museum and embedded it in the wall. So we have tried in the past to borrow this twice, and we knew they weren't going to lend it. So we've done photo murals and we've done various things. But with new technology, and a very talented and naive young employee who said she would be happy to tackle this, using a painting that had been done in the 1830s before it was excavated, she digitally replaced all the missing tesserae. We knew the colors. We knew there were 6 different colors for it. There are over 1.5 million tesserae on here. So poor Abby would go out into the mall after a few hours and just run or do whatever. But she did it, and it allowed us to put the whole thing back the way it originally was, because this in the Naples Museum has all been separated. You saw this on the wall. These are scenes of the Nile. They're in different parts of the museum. Alexander had just conquered Egypt, so that's why they were doing this. These are copies of the same columns that were in the room. And you could walk across it for the first time. Why do we have this slide? Well, when my now 30-something-year-old daughter was in kindergarten with a class, they came, and I gave these kids a tour of the office and an Aztec exhibition, and we had a model. And at the end of it, I thought, okay, I didn't scare them. You know, we didn't get into blood sacrifices or anything. They seemed happy. And at the end, my daughter said, "Daddy, you play with dollhouses." And of course, I was shattered. You know, everybody else's dad was a lawyer or something, an accountant. And but I realized that is what I do now. So, as you can see. So we're back up in the design office here. You see Hardwick Hall's windows, which we salvaged, and they're in the office. It sort of separates the front office from the back part of the office. And this was a model for Diaghilev. These models are very, very serious things, actually. So that is I think, a great image. And this is our crack silkscreen team. Barbara Keys and Lisa and Chip, I think, is up there, or Jeff or somebody. I can't tell who that is at the moment. But this is how they do it. And that's the entrance, and you can see how closely the model is to the finished design. And again, playing with dollhouses. This is Andrea, one of our architects, working on a Diaghilev exhibition as well. The models for the actual stage costumes for almost all of these ballets are gone, because they're, people wore them out, and the Nijinsky and all these people would rip the knees out, and they'd throw them away, as they did with the stage curtains. They're very rare that they survive. Picasso's stage managers, New York and Paris, are long gone. So if you ever see them in an exhibition, MoMA has had them, the Tate has had them, I forget, we've had them, France, they've been at the Orsay. So that's John making one. And here we are up above us, working on the room with Andrea and the finished effect. So we gave these we gave to a local ballet school in Washington. And that was a 2-minute film clip that showed the one actual surviving costume was the Chinese conjurer, and that was in the room. And then again, a model of Petrushka for Diaghilev. Now this was interesting because the stage curtains, again, as I said, almost all of them are gone. We had 2 in the show. Natalia Goncharova, which I showed you, and Picasso's, the last work in the show is Picasso. But this was a great kind of Halloween imagery of a mysterious night during the ballet of Petrushka in St. Petersburg, Russia. And this represents a little gouache, a little watercolor gouache. It's only about that big. So this is what we were going to do, and this would be the 3-minute film. But it turned out to actually be quicker and easier to have one of our talented people on the staff, Jeff Wilson, paint it. He's a painter. So he just took it upon himself to do it. So that was an actual painting with these strange, surreal animals flying around. The only surprise, which we didn't really tell anybody outside of the staff, was that this section, which had been done by Benoit, the artist, was St. Petersburg. And when I asked Jeff if he could do the rest of it, he said, yeah, sure, fine. So he went online, he found the imagery, and he put it all together. It was great. The night of the opening, the Russian ambassador was here, and he said, that's great. That's St. Petersburg on the left and Moscow on the right. We were like, nobody knew. It's all gone now. Okay, we play with dollhouses. You get the point. This is a selection of George and Linda Kaufman's great 18th and early 19th century American furniture, which is on view in the Central Gallery in the West Building. All fit on somebody's desk. You can see it in its cardboard form. It takes a lot of thinking and planning to get to the stage. That's what you'll see if you go in there today, hopefully. So this is one of our faux painters. This is Glenn Perry. Howard Hodgkins. It's pretty cool, isn't it? And today, there it is. Now, occasionally in our job, we do build things that stay, which is rare because mostly what we do is design temporary exhibitions that come and go every 6 months, more or less. Anybody know what this is? It's got to be somebody. Yeah, right from the White House. The White House. This is the White House in 1950. So when somebody's telling you you're walking on the same floors that Abraham Lincoln walked down, not exactly. So when the White House was really kind of falling apart in the 50s, they didn't know what to do with all the furniture, and somebody said, hey, the new National Gallery down the street has a gymnasium, which we did. We had a gymnasium, and we still have a shooting gallery. So there are these strange things that go back. So when I came here, there was a gym, and it was a storage area since the 1950s, and it had heaps of carpeting and old baffles and chairs and every post, just everything, just a fire hazard in the middle. It had 2 basketball hoops. It was on a regulation maple floor, beautiful. It had the foul lines and everything on the floor of the gym. So the design studio that you saw a moment ago was right here, kind of hanging up in this area. We put a skylight in. But from more or less exactly this vantage point, this is what we built. And we did this about, 25 years ago. So you've seen exhibitions in there like the first Vermeer show, Cézanne, Art of Power, the 18th century French, that's in there today. We use these galleries, Hubert Robert, we use these all the time. And here, this was literally a broom and mop closet on the main floor of the West Building, just off the National Mall. And the walls basically are the structural supports for the inner dome, which is the coffer dome that looks like the Pantheon, and the outer dome, which is the marble. And there's an area in between that you can walk around, and there's storerooms way up there, 81 feet above ground level. It's called the 81-foot level. But this is Floyd Everly, who is our master carpenter in our office. Surveying that, we decided that what we needed in this beautifully designed West Building were more intimate spaces for small Dutch pictures like Vermeer. And that's what we built. That's where you will see the Vermeers today. This is a little plug for this fall, but you probably all know we are having an exhibition of Vermeer and his contemporaries, more or less his competitors, in I think October 21st it opens. West Building. Great show. 10 Vermeers in that show alone. Now, I know this is a boring image, but I'd like to sear this into your mind. This was the old lobby that led to the director's, Carter Brown's office on the right, and all the way down. Everyone was in the West Building. Every curator, the treasurer, the publications area, conservation, all the curators. And this is from the exact spot. We said, yes, we could build more galleries for more or less devoted to sculpture. And this, from this perspective, is what we think we can build, judging from the plans. So that's the reality. If you've ever done home demolition, you know how bad it is. And it's filled with lead, and it was filled with tons of asbestos, all of which had to be taken out. So we had closets and water closets, the whole bit. There were columns where they weren't supposed to be. There were no columns where we thought there would be columns. But that's what we built, and that's what's there today. And so we're very proud occasionally to build things that stay, at least for a while. And in that vein, more or less, I think that the installation of the Calders upstairs should last for, I hope for quite some time. These are some of the kind of plans that we work with in the office when we're trying to come up with an idea. And then when we get a little further along, we build the model. This is Carol. Carol used to be our sort of perfect size maquette. We'd move her around because we knew how big she was. Very patient woman. There it goes. And that's what you'll see if you've been up there today. This is more or less directly above us. I'm going to run you through now. These are a final series of images, and I think it best sums up what we do in the office because we're going to be concentrating on one area. This is Tower 1, Tower 2, Tower 3. Tower 3 is a little smaller. 3 exterior skylights, 6, and they're connected by the bridge. North Bridge on Pennsylvania Avenue and the West Bridge through there. So this is the public area for those of you that don't know the East Building well. And this is the private section of the building. We had a camera in this room right from the get-go, and this camera will always stay in the same place. It doesn't move. And we took these images, and this is just a selection of what has transpired in there in 39 years. So let's zip through. So that's the building before it opened. That's Rodin. Treasure House of Britain. So we got up to 1985. This is the Palladian section. Jock Whitney. So this is a little bit more like an elegant New York apartment. There's a scrim ceiling, so there's soft daylight coming in. Feels a little more domestic. George O'Keeffe. Daimyo art from Japan. Momoyama art. Frederick Church, and kind of working off Olana. And we built this huge Victorian frame, much more complicated than this, was done to raise money for the Sanitary Commission during the Civil War. And it was destroyed, but we sort of reworked it because it enhanced the perspective, the sense that you were on a precipice. Gifts to the Nation. So these paintings are hanging. There's Van Gogh's White Roses, Hazeltine, Winslow Homer, Toulouse-Lautrec. And then another colossal exhibition, the circa 1492. 3 sections, Europe, from which Columbus sailed, Cathay, where he thought he was going, and the New World. So bang, he comes right into the Aztec, one of the great expressionistic basalt works of art, Rattlesnake. The first time that the Barnes collection left Marion, Pennsylvania, came here. Prints from the Gemini workshop. Klaus Oldenburg. So it was fun working with Klaus, a living artist, and his late wife, Koja von Bruggen. So we laid all this out together. It's a BLT, by the way. Winslow Homer, more 19th century. Stations of the Cross, Barnett Newman. Now, Edo art in Japan. So we're in 18th, 19th century. Picasso. Thomas Moran, the great late 19th century American painter. Alexander Calder. We worked with Calder's grandson, Sandy Rower, with whom we worked again on the installation upstairs. Recent archaeological finds from China. Everything in this show was excavated in the last 25 years. It was a breathtaking show. American modernism. Art Nouveau. Now this room, just to pause here for a minute, this was a very eccentric room that had no right angles. And if ever there was a room more or less designed for Hector Guimard, the designer of the metro stations, if ever there was a room that would not have a life after 90 days, it was this room. But this is exactly the same room with paint, and we patched up, obviously, the architectural grid on the wall, and it worked very well for Henry Moore during the World War II years. It's the same room. 2 mummies, put them in, paint it, Valley of the Kings. But for Kirchner, hard-edged German expressionist works, it did not. So that is a change. And now to show you how little happens in a room like this, the only change here is the doors are 6 inches narrower for Romer Bearden. But for a Maya exhibition and a small recreation of the Temple of Bonampak, we needed to change the room. Again, Dan Flavin required his own spaces. Dada was a big, sprawling exhibition in 6 different cities. And then the Douanier Rousseau, Henri Rousseau, and the Naive painter. This is a good slide to talk to graphic designers about enlargements, because this was a wood engraving about 9 by 12, I think. And you can blow those up with clarity almost to any size. And in a sense, it defined, I think, very well, or underscored the theme of the exhibition, which was, the title was Jungles in Paris. And Rousseau, who was a postal clerk, never left Paris. So if you look closely, you see he's actually in the greenhouse, like the Botanical Gardens. And then Hopper, same room. We put in a skylight and painted it, and same curved wall for Barbizon painting. Same skylight. Now we are working with Pompeii. Post-war art from the Meyerhoffs. Canaletto and his rivals. Andy Warhol. Juan Miró, these are his, more or less all of his wonderful little constellation paintings. Large paintings by Lichtenstein. These are big, these are 10-foot doors, just to give you a sense of how big that room is. And then Diaghilev, which was the last exhibition up in that space until we closed for 3 years. We stripped it out like that. That's the way it looks today. The good old rooster. Seen from the top. Well, Dan. Thank you. Thank you.